So I just wanted to say thank you first and foremost to joining our webinar today with our extremely qualified and insightful panel. This is Beat the Summer Burnout. We're going to talk about real life tools to combat stress. So we are extremely happy to have you, especially at the start of summer, even though today it doesn't feel quite like summer quite yet. I am John Carroll. I am going to be hosting this webinar. I am with Employment Hero. And if you're learning about Employment Hero, if you're not super familiar with us, we are on a mission to make employment easier and more valuable for everyone. And we do that by being the leading all-in-one recruitment HR software, payroll, and benefits platform for both employees and employers in the UK. This webinar is co-hosted and also brought to you by Sonder, which, if you're just learning about Sonder, also a good one to be aware of and be familiar with. Sonder is a digital care platform that combines modern technology with a team of certified healthcare experts to provide workforce safety at the touch of a button. So that means employees can have 24/7 access to self-help or can live chat with a team of safety, medical, and mental health professionals. If an in-person support is needed, Sonder acts quickly to get someone on-site quickly for time-sensitive scenarios. So as you can guess, and I'm excited to kind of move into our panel in just a second here, but we have an expert team of people really well qualified to talk about burnout and what that might come with as far as summer comes. So just a quick reminder with these webinars, and something that's good to keep in mind is this webinar is designed to provide general information. It's not considered professional or medical advice. If you are seeking or in need of professional medical advice, we recommend always consulting that professional for specific guidance on how to deal with your personal situation and stress and burnout. So with that, I'm going to introduce today's speakers. We have three, and I'm very excited to kind of introduce them and then let them introduce themselves. First is Rebecca Bull, who's the founder and owner of My HR Hub and My HR Club, who's a chartered fellow of CIPD. We have Dr. Julian, who is the Sonder clinical partner and founder of Dr. Julian Online Healthcare. And then also Marcos Rios, who's a co-founder of Find Your Flow, and I think also is enjoying this cold London day. So with that, Rebecca, I'd love if you could share a few words and introduce yourself.
Thank you, John. Hello, everybody. It's really great to be here, and so many of you as well joining. So as John mentioned, I started my own HR consultancy in the UK 8 years ago now. Obviously not without its challenges and obviously stress, etc. So I feel, really privileged to be here, having been on the receiving end, I guess, of quite a stressful time starting your own business. We work with many companies across the UK and further afield, as well as internationally, in terms of helping them become really great employers. So obviously a big focus for us is health and well-being and how to make really great cultures. So obviously there are, limitations in terms of employees hitting kind of that stress wall or suffering from burnout. So I feel really happy to be here today. So it's a piece of kind of HR, certainly from a lifestyle point of view and professionally, that I really enjoy finding out more about. So it's great to be with Julian and Marcus here today to also learn more. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. Dr. Julian.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, lovely to be here and to see you all. So my name's Julian. I'm a doctor by background. I still work as a GP with a special interest in mental health. And I guess my passion is to try and improve access to mental health care, obviously with the challenges that we're facing in this modern world. And I thought we could do that by using technology. So we've built a platform that connects you almost immediately to clinicians and the right clinician for you, giving you choice and personalization to find that personalized level of mental health care support with the professional. And we work alongside Sonder, and we're clinical partners with them. Sonder is acting as that early intervention platform for organizations that can help prevent crises before they cost businesses or their people. And I think by working together, we can actually offer that full range of mental health care support, getting the right care for that individual. Thank you.
And last but absolutely not least, Marcos. Oh, I think you're on mute, maybe.
Hello, everyone. Sorry about that. Nice to meet you. My name is Marcos. I'm the co-founder of Find Your Flow. which is a company that offers a personalized solution for employees to manage stress at work and prevent burnout. The reason why we start this company is because, number one, we believe that everyone deserves to feel good and alive every day, not only on holidays or after work. That's number one. And second, having built my career in working for corporations like Unilever, Reckitt, big and small, I never really found a real support in terms of supporting employees managing stress at work and preventing burnout. And having gone through burnout a couple of times, and having looked at the stats in the UK, where 65% of the UK workers are in burnout, we just couldn't understand how companies haven't yet, adapted and provide that type of support. Hence why we embarked on a mission to do it and build it and support employees, and that's why we founded Find Your Flow. Nice to meeting you all.
Yes, thank you so much. And I think tackling this is a big topic, and I think we have a panel that's extremely well qualified to do that. I think the chat can be a great place to ask, as questions are coming up, or if you want to engage with things or you find stats interesting, feel free. Like, this is meant to be an interactive webinar. You can drop them in the chat. If you have specific questions that you'd like us to answer, at the end, you can drop them in the Q&A. Function, and the whole goal here is we want to be able to answer your questions and give you access to this incredible panel. So please don't be shy about doing that, and anything we don't get to, we can certainly revert and reply after the fact. So, and that being said, we have actually reserved time for Q&A as well. So we will hopefully be able to get to all of the questions that you might have. So with that, let's get into our first kind of topic, which is understanding summer burnout, what it is and how to recognize its signs amongst your team. And one of the things that we just kind of did here at Employment Hero was a study that found that 2 in 3 of us feels burnout or has felt burnout. And actually, it doesn't affect the genders equally. Actually, women feel it disproportionately and slightly more burnt out than men. So I'd love to actually start by delving into what your understanding of burnout is and how, as employees, we can let our managers know if we or a team member are experiencing it, or if we're maybe seeing the signs of it. So Rebecca, I would love for you to start by explaining what burnout is and why it tends to be more prevalent during the summer months.
Thank you, John. So the term burnout is commonly used to describe a situation where an employee experiences a period of mental or physical fatigue, and as a result of extended or high intensity pressure at work. And doing some research about that, it's really interesting that the potential debilitating effects of burnout, the World Health Organization has included now the term in the International Classification of Diseases, meaning from 2020, burnout is a globally recognized international condition. So the World Health Organization specifically defines burnout as feeling depleted of energy or exhaustion, an individual's increased mental distance from their job, or negative or cynical feelings towards their job, or reduced professional efficiency. So what I found really interesting was the WHO's definition is obviously related to work-related stress. Obviously, what saying that suggests that work is the place where stress starts, which we know it is a place, but also we know there are external factors as well from home, which can contribute towards burnout. But certainly from that, I think certainly businesses should be encouraged to look at early warning signs. I think why it's more prevalent in the summer is because perhaps, we get this sun and we think, okay, we need to do everything. We're juggling the pressures of work, of an increased workload perhaps, and also an explosion of kind of social commitments, which leaves us all, many of us, exhausted and overstretched. Also, the summer months is when most people go on holiday, which in turn creates a huge pile of work to get through. So obviously going on holiday, you've got to do your work before you go to kind of cover for that week or the 2 weeks or the 10 days, whatever we're having. During that time off work, we're probably thinking about, well, did I do that? Did I do that? If you're not really building good health and well-being into your annual kind of plan of looking after yourself, you'll probably take 2 or 3 to 4 days to actually fully relax on holiday, and then perhaps day 4 you might start feeling relaxed, and usually then day 7 it's time to think about coming home. But obviously also you're likely to also to be covering for co-workers during that time, which can add to the day-to-day stress of things that you have to do, that never-ending list, if you like. And also there's perception perhaps that summer is a quiet time for business. You know, for lots of our European colleagues, they close for August, and that's great, fantastic. You know, we wish we lived there, but we don't. But actually the summer months in the UK are generally also extremely busy for everybody. And finally, as John mentioned, we know that stress is actually higher with women by 50% compared to men, with women still being mainly the primary carer for children. So obviously the additional stress of raising families while pursuing a career continues for women. And then the added pressures also about finding childcare, paying the extortionate costs, which obviously impact on financial well-being as well, and then also performing at work. And I think also since COVID, there's been a huge kind of shift change in caring responsibilities as well. So there's lots of things to kind of manage around the summer months, but I think it should be definitely all year round, you know, managing yourself and looking after your health and well-being.
No, that's really interesting, and I think you know, at least on like the schedule overload, it's actually it's a secretly busy time. I think it's definitely something you kind of hope for coming into the summer, and then you're like, oh, nope, it's just redistributed a little bit. So I'd love to actually turn it to you, Dr. Julian, from a clinical perspective. What are the key signs of burnout? Like, what should managers and colleagues be looking for amongst their team members, like during the summer? Like, what are the things that they really need to be paying attention to?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, as Rebecca said, burnout is a state of complete mental, physical, and emotional exhaustion. And I'm going to go through some of those symptoms in a minute, but we can also go through some of the causes from a clinical perspective to do with your autonomic nervous system and how that works, which I can explain later. But the main symptoms, I'm going to break them down first into physical symptoms. So you can get fatigue, you can get headaches, you can get stomach aches, being able to become ill more frequently because your immune system's depressed. You have changes in your appetite and issues with your sleeping. It can increase your blood pressure, and it can cause anxiety effects with a faster heartbeat. So those are the physical symptoms. You then have emotional symptoms such as helplessness, cynicism, feelings of failure or self-doubt, decreased satisfaction, feeling detached or alone, loss of motivation, irritability, and anger. And then behavioral signs. So this is something that managers can kind of potentially look out for in their staff. So someone that's not performing, so reduced performance in everyday tasks, someone's looking withdrawn and isolated, someone's procrastinating. You kind of want to understand why that's happening. And then one of the coping mechanisms that people sometimes use is obviously alcohol and other substances to try and cope with that. And then mental symptoms such as trouble concentrating, forgetfulness, disillusionment, and loss of idealism. I think what's also really important to state is burnout and mental health is a spectrum, and people can be anywhere on that spectrum. And when you get to that point where it's affecting your everyday daily life, that's when it becomes a mental health disorder. So some people can cope with it and live with it, then it's sort of a mental health trait as such. When it's a disorder, that's when something really, really does need to be done. And ideally what we want to do is preventing that state. But when we go into that state of disorder, we have to deal with it quickly. So the two main sort of mental health disorders that we would look out for from burnout would be anxiety and depression. And just to understand what a diagnosis of depression means, it's where you have persistent low mood every day, pretty much every day for at least 3 months, alongside loss of interest in activities. So someone that would have enjoyed doing an activity no longer enjoys doing that. But the key there to say that you have depression is it has to be for that duration of around 3 months. So, you know, and that every day. And then anxiety, when you become into an anxiety state, so everybody gets a level of anxiety. I mean, all of us get it. And again, I can go through why you might feel anxious and ways of dealing with that. But when you're having a mental health disorder from anxiety, it's where you can't control it at all. And any situation causes you to become seriously anxious. So something that shouldn't normally cause you to be anxious, i.e., fast heart rate, worry, fear, persistent worry about everyday situations, that's when, it shouldn't normally do that. It's doing it all the time. Again, there's ways of dealing with that, but it's really important to say if you get to that point where it's becoming a disorder, it's very important to deal with that quickly. So yeah, a lot of information there, but hopefully that makes sense.
No, I think it does. And it sounds like, I mean, it can manifest and present in a lot of different ways, but it's really looking for that kind of pattern and that persistence that really like turns it into kind of when it comes into the clinical world in your space. So Marcos, would love to hear kind of your perspective with Find Your Flow. Like, how have you seen burnout manifest? Like, how have you helped like companies like form strategies to address it strategically and effectively?
Thank you. I would reiterate first what Rebecca and Julian said. It has three, main characteristics, physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion. However, this is very easy to say, but it's really difficult to be aware, correct? How do I know that, yeah, I'm experiencing a mental, physical, and emotional exhaustion? You need to be a person with high levels of awareness to pinpoint that easily and say, okay, now I would like to get support. So how was this effectively addressed with the work that we do at Find Your Flow, right? Number one, we support the workforce in terms of that development of self-awareness. You need to know how to identify that you are depleted in each area or some of them to then be able to use tools to address it, or professionals, right? So at Find Your Flow, we do both. We support the workforce with mindfulness tools so they can increase the levels of awareness. And then we support with the tools that are specifically for the individuals, for them to be able to go through that process and hopefully prevent burnout. And if they land into burnout, they are in a much better state, to go through the recovery versus not knowing anything about it, right? So I think that's what we do. That's how we have effectively addressed with mindfulness, right? But of course, we understand that the percentage would require some professional, doctors to make the interventions. But I think that you're in a much better position if you are aware and you can identify somehow what's going on versus not knowing and feeling that you are the only one. The reality is like you are not. 65% of the UK workers are in burnout. So when you look at your office, half of it, statistically, are going through that, but no one talks about it, right? So again, what we do at Find Your Flow is like we support the workforce in that development of awareness. And second, we give the tools. Okay, these are the tools that anyone can use, to, back to Julian, activate, like their vagus nerve and, trigger a calm response, in the brain and the rest of the body. An example of that. So many tools, personalized, with high levels of awareness. That's how we have seen that this issue has been effectively addressed in the workforce. That all of that leads to better health, number one. And second, you're actually having a more productive workforce, because if the individual is well, he, she, or they will give their best. If they are not, it's not going to happen. And I think that that's what business nowadays are starting to understand. Thank you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think taking it to kind of the next topic, which feels very much like it kind of dovetails and fits with what you were just saying. And I think between the three of you, like managing stress, managing workloads, and especially that shift that happens in summer can be a big part of that. So on this topic, would love to really talk about and kind of explore how we actually handle workloads efficiently while also managing a reduced workforce. So Rebecca, if you could kind of start us off and talk about why it's so important. I'm sorry, what are some practical tips for managing workloads in the summer when we might have more staff members on holiday and the team operating with a reduced workforce?
Yeah, definitely. So I think ultimately thinking about this question, the businesses are responsible to make sure they are not overburdening their employees. So this could be about them really thinking about reprioritizing workloads, pushing projects or objectives back, or bringing in temporary support and resources. So just because your other co-workers are on leave does not necessarily mean that another employee has to pick up that additional workload. So I feel really strong about this, that employees can push back, because that's the advice we would give our clients and also the employees that we support within the businesses. I know to do this, you probably have to be quite assertive and be organised in the workload, and perhaps give justification why you can't take on additional workload, and have real awareness of the boundaries in order to protect your own well-being at work. However, we don't live in an ideal world for sure, but so what we are seeing is, certainly from our clients' point of view, more requests from them for us to provide training on time management for their employees. And I think certainly with time management, it can absolutely help. It's not the end solution. There are lots of different approaches that need to be taken, I think, collectively, to get to a place where you can actually manage workloads effectively. So I think, going back to the Employment Hero survey, so I'd recommend that everybody takes a look at this, because it really is a fantastic piece of work. What we've been working with for many years now with health and wellbeing partners is looking at the 7 dimensions of health and wellbeing. So it's not just about managing your email to-do list. It's not just about saying no. It's not about just about delegating. It's really about looking after your overall health and well-being and happiness, which is 7 different factors. I won't go into the descriptions of those, but sort of high level, it's physical, mental, financial, occupational, relational, spiritual, and recreational. So it's almost like a Tonka toy, if you like. If there's 7 batteries there, if one's depleted, the tractor won't move forward, and you get a very unhappy child at Christmas. But obviously, if they're all, firing on all cylinders, and you're managing, not just kind of focusing on delegation or managing objectives and time management, looking more holistically how you manage yourself in and outside of work, that goes away to help you be able to, kind of manage, increased pressures and stresses as and when they come. So I think, in summary, I feel strongly that you can push back. Don't overdo it. Don't take on so much that it contributes towards burnout, because that isn't your responsibility. That's where a business should really step up and manage their health and safety of their workers, which is obviously their duty of care.
Yeah, I really like that and appreciate that battery analogy. I think oftentimes people kind of think of it as a single battery, but actually it's really kind of all these batteries working together. And I think that's a really insightful kind of mindset shift in the way that maybe people might visualize and revisualize this. So with that, like, Dr. Julian, would love to ask you, like, for people managers, how are they kind of meant to kind of step up and balance this need for productivity with also the need to not overwhelm their teams, particularly during this period when resources might be stretched a little bit thin?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I echo everything Rebecca said there. And I think the key to that is really understanding the individuals that you have working with you, and how much you are putting on that person. Because as to that battery analogy, everyone is different at different times in their lives of what they can deal with at that particular time. So it's really having that awareness. And, we've gone through some of the symptoms of what burnout could look like. So it's also having that awareness and being open and honest, and having that communication with your team to understand how they're feeling. Are they able to take on more pressure or not? And certain people might be able to take on more pressure at different times of their lives. It's that person, you need to look at them in a holistic manner. What if they've just had a child that they've had no sleep? So there's lots of different factors that could be considered on that. So I think the key thing there is, obviously it's a balancing act, because you've got things you've got to get done. I think understanding the employee workforce that you have and trying to prepare for that in the long run, planning ahead is key and vital. Unfortunately, if you do put on way too much pressure on someone because you've got so much on, then they're actually going to be underproductive, and you might actually make way more problems for yourself than if you're actually cutting back a little bit. So it might be that if you've got an urgent deadline, it just depends on how urgent that is, and making sure that if you aren't able to meet it, you're open and honest with everyone around that because of the situation that you're in. Again, just about perspective. So I think, yeah, I mean, echo everything Rebecca says, but for me, the key thing is about awareness, understanding your employees, and understanding how much you can and can't put on that person.
Yeah, and so it sounds like it's really about just like an open dialogue around capacity, and also like people being willing to kind of trust and communicate with their manager, like on where they're actually at in their lives, and kind of how full those batteries are, so to speak. So Marcos would love to actually kind of get into the tools side of things. Like, are there any
Yeah.
tools that you've seen kind of prove especially effective when it comes to trying to distribute workload and kind of maintain team morale during the summer?
Yeah, and I'll first echo what Rebecca and Julia said in regards to awareness. Number one, use the mindfulness tools for you to develop high levels of awareness, because that will help you articulate, very well, what you're experiencing and your views in terms of the workload that needs to get done. That's also going to give you the confidence, because you will be certain, of what you're experiencing. You can also add some facts, and then you will come across in a much better way when you address this particular problem or challenge, put it that way. In terms of tools that will help you to distribute and managing workload more effectively, at Find Your Flow, we put a lot of emphasis into journal at work, because that will help you realize what's important and what's not important. That will help you to prioritize better, And when it comes down to workload, it can help you. It will be a valuable tool for you to understand what are the 3 things that you need to do, that will ultimately deliver, the most of the impact, and then focus on them and communicate to others, i.e. your colleagues and your boss, the things that are not going to get done, because you are so aware about your capacity, the capacity of others, that you clearly came up with the conclusion that these are the 3 things that are realistically, going to get done. And this is the time, that you have to deliver. And if you can't, it gives that self-reassurance, if you know very well where you stand, but you must do the work. And in order for you to do the work, you need to have the tools. Yeah. And that tools, if you use them, plus high levels of awareness, you'll be in a much better position to adjust, the work load, and also serve as a support for your colleagues, because I think that it's a community. When you work in a company, you like it or not, you are part of that organization. You're a community. And if you take that step in terms of be super aware, use the tools that are available for you, you're also, creating that ripple effect, where more people would benefit from the action that you're taking on yourself. So think about, use the tools, be aware, and also be a good, source of change for others to follow. It's not easy to be aware. It's the hardest thing, but it's the first step, towards, improvement. So thank you.
So with that, I want to move on to kind of our next topic, which is unplugging from work. So with unplugging for work, Rebecca, I want to kind of start with you here. We're going to talk about kind of how to ensure employees can truly step away from work during their time off. So what are some of the best practices for handling kind of that holiday handover work when employees are going on holiday to ensure continuity without adding stress, if you will? I think that I love a handover doc personally, so I'm excited to hear some of your tips here.
Yeah, so definitely I'd encourage good time management principles in any behaviour, in any handover, for sure. So kind of going back to that, and then looking at what's outstanding, and perhaps also working with the manager in terms of what needs to go where in terms of handing that over. But obviously, as mentioned earlier, the business needs to ensure that the additional work is feasible and that the employee can actually take that on and doesn't contradict the duty of care in terms of their responsibility regarding health and well-being. If employees are struggling, definitely where there's a good culture and open and honest conversations, these should be in place for them to raise concerns. And also we talk about this quite a lot in time management, the ability to say no. So most of us, or I certainly was brought up to, actually that's quite a negative thing. You've got to be going the extra mile, you've got to be on your A game all the time. But actually saying no can also create trust and respect, especially if you're actually managing your boundaries and you know exactly what you have to do. You can still be effective and a high performer, even if you say no, so it doesn't have to be a negative response. But certainly about planning ahead, looking at what needs to be done, perhaps thinking about potential bumps in the road or scenarios that could come up, and then allowing whoever's you're handing over to, making sure they're comfortable with everything, but then also planning some buffers and some time for when things do go wrong and these spontaneous things come and you know the curveballs that we all know and love every day. So actually making sure there's enough bandwidth there to manage everything, but essentially definitely going back to, is this feasible? Can this person take on the additional workload as well as their own as well as their own job as well? So yeah, checking in with the management as well is really useful. And then clearly coming back to work, there's obviously the handover back in terms of what's happened, what do I need to pick up on, and getting everybody back into, you know, kind of the flow of things again.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. And I think the next area will kind of dive into that, actually handling the holiday handover a little bit. But Dr. Julian, would love to hear from you. Can you provide some insights more kind of specifically into managing the potential stress that comes with these handovers and how to support staff through these transitions?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's in terms of unplugging and supporting, I think the first thing to say is there's actually a lot of scientific studies now out there showing the importance of unplugging. And actually, if you do manage to do that, then you hugely reduce your risk of burnout and subsequently, obviously, mental health issues as well. It is very difficult, right? Because we now live in this modern world where you're constantly stimulated by everything. I mean, I find that having an iPhone or an Android phone or whatever is actually a real issue because you constantly get bombarded by texts and emails and everything like that, which unfortunately activates your autonomic nervous system. And just going into that science a little bit to understand why you feel stress and why that happens. Well, we're built as human beings where we evolved back in the ancient times where we were running away from bears, and we've still got that innate response. So if something triggers you or activates you, i.e. a bear, your autonomic nervous system, which is part of your nervous system, activates itself. And what that does is it releases a load of chemicals, adrenaline and cortisol, which essentially puts you on edge and ready to run away. It's called your fight or flight response, which I'm sure you've probably heard of. The issue we have now is that lots of different triggers activate that fight or flight response. So it used to be very helpful, and it still is if, I guess, a car's going to run you over, but it's not very helpful when you get an email. And the more sort of burnt out you are, the worse that trigger can be. So we need to try and bring that back and work out ways to reduce the level of autonomic nervous system activation that we can get, which I can go through some of those tactics and things that we can do. So, I mean, just to go into that now in terms of how do you unplug? Well, obviously, reduce those triggers to start with, right? So it depends. I'm not very good at this, but can you put your phone in a drawer? Can you actually go out into nature and actually not try and get those triggers to activate you? I mean, different people respond well to different things, which is why things have to be personalized. I mean, for me personally, there are a few things that really help to reduce that level of activation of my autonomic nervous system. So exercise is a huge thing, which has a huge amount of research behind it, especially high intensity exercise. And that's the same as well with, you might have heard of everyone now trying to do cold water immersion. These two things can actually cause your body to feel stress and be shocked, and therefore the relative shock of receiving an email is less. So therefore your actual response from your autonomic nervous system from other triggers is reduced, and therefore you have less stress and less cortisol released. And there's lots of other things that can also manage that. The other massive thing is breathing, which again I can sort of go into later. But those are sort of some of the tips that I would give for now. And yeah, we can go into a bit more detail later on if we want.
Yeah, I mean, one, that's amazing. I'm impressed to hear that there is like science behind the ice bath situation. I've just always been skeptical that, you know, nothing worse than I think stepping into a shower that's not properly warmed up. So maybe that's in fact elevating my stress levels. Now I know, maybe I should try it the other direction.
And yeah, just to caveat to that, please, I can't give medical advice here. And obviously, if you have got heart problems and other things, don't immediately do high intensity exercise or jump into water. So you need to be based on your current situation and build things up gradually, potentially. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's definitely an important disclaimer. So Marcos, kind of to you now. So what are some of the methods as far as helping employees truly unplug, so that they can actually return to work refreshed from their holidays? Like, you know, let's get into the tools and the tips again.
Amazing. Well, supporting what Rebecca and Julian has just mentioned, and I think that the top, support that we would give to the workforce that we support is to train your mind and prepare your mindset for when you want to unplug or for when you want to go on holidays. We have this, 3 elements: emotional exhaustion, physical, and mental. However, if you prepare your mind and you put your mindset into the space of, okay, now it's time to unplug, to rest, because from science we know that we need to rest. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. Nothing is going to work if you don't take the proper time to rest. If you put yourself into the mindset and then you use your tools such as block notifications, or you simply leave the phone at home, you don't bring your laptop to your holidays, you remove the temptation from you. And I'm using the word temptation because it's a behavior, right? We work most of our life. So you have the behavior to go and check, what's happening with the email, what's happening at work. Remove it, remove it, from your space, because you are already in the mindset of, okay, I need to rest. This is a must. There are millions of scientific studies that is going to back this up. That's a fact. I need to do this. Then you have your mind and say, okay, I'm intentionally removing myself from all of this distraction because I need to unplug, right? And then on top of that, you have many tools. You can meditate, you can do cold immersions, you can do mindful walking, you can do many things. But of course, once the distraction is away, it's easier. Because otherwise you fall into the behaviors, oh my God, let me check that email. And then your mind is already not in Greece. It's never down to the place. You could be in Greece and your mind still being in London. What you want to be in Greece and your mind being in the beach, eating the nice food without your mind being in London. This is really hard to achieve. But if you work on your mind, in Find Your Flow, we do that. We support people train their minds and put themselves in that mindset. Then we give the tools. Then you would probably take the most out of your time and properly unplug. Or at least, you would be in a much better state versus having the distraction, not having the mindset of, oh, I need to rest. I think that would be from my end. Thank you.
No, amazing. And I think that's, I think that as you've been reiterating with the tools, is it's really that awareness piece, it sounds like is and kind of like establishing some good habits and not just kind of trying to go into it and be like, I hope I unplug. Like, you actually have to be very intentional about it, it sounds like.
Exactly.
Amazing. So let's jump into this one, and I think we maybe preview this one a little bit. But Rebecca, would love to hear from you. I guess either on unplugging or handling holiday, kind of the handover process. Like, are there any additional, best practices or tips you have across here?
Yeah, definitely. And I think certainly burnout itself, when we listen to Dr. Julian in terms of the clinical side effects, it really is, quite debilitating. So we know burnout has a huge effect or detrimental impact on us at work and also at home. It affects our health, our output, reduces productivity, and overall impacts our quality of work, but also impacts our personal life. So it's really important to recognise the signs of burnout, to build in prevention strategies like Mark has said, and Julian as well, across the year and not just in summer. I think if you've got good strategies in place and really look after yourself throughout the year, then summer becomes less of a problem. It's just another bump in the road you deal with, like anything else that happens throughout the year. So certainly switching off is something we really should do, because we deserve to switch off every day after a good day's work. We deserve to switch off at the weekend. We deserve to switch off when we have a break. We deserve to switch off on holiday. We all deserve to have that respite time. And I think interestingly, doing some research on this for today, last year with the culture of the overtime in the UK compared to perhaps some of our continental colleagues, has the impact of, the unpaid overtime collectively across the UK was a total of £32 billion worth of unpaid overtime. So certainly for businesses, again, there's a huge kind of call on those to avoid creating situations where staff feel pressure to take on more, to work long hours, and to take work home with them. So businesses are absolutely responsible and key to helping with this, to avoid staff burning out, and obviously burdening their staff as well. There's obviously the rest breaks, encouraging annual leave. We know they're vital tools in helping prevent kind of health issues and burnout, but also many companies still feel presenteeism is a great thing. They feel that actually people coming to work, actually being present when they shouldn't be. We know quite a few people that actually don't enjoy holidays. They perhaps don't have anyone to go with. They're perhaps on their own. They don't want to be on holiday on their own, so they actually choose to work because it's distraction and keeps them kind of, integrated in society. But we know that's clearly not a good thing. We know all about the white papers and making sure everyone has the relevant holiday as well. But also what creeps in quite a lot in terms of kind of similar themes here is those people working from home or hybrid remote, when they're actually ill, they still seem to be working from home. So again, really working with employees to make sure that actually, if you're off sick, if you're not well, you're still not tempted to actually log on and work, because if you're ill, you should be resting and recovering.
Yeah.
Depending what happens with the government, I will be really welcoming the right to connect policy, which is obviously prevalent again in Europe. So I don't know if any of you have heard of the right to disconnect. So basically, it's a policy to make sure that employers do not contact employees after work, either in the evenings or the weekends. And there are sanctions imposed for those who breach that legislation as well. So the right to disconnect is a policy that, therefore, a system that works against all of this to encourage people to have rest in the evenings and rest at the weekends. Some businesses in the UK, actually, we do have right to disconnect policies for our clients. Some of them do request that as part of their initiatives to manage health and well-being and make sure that employees are getting the rest when they need it, and certainly not being sent and pinged messages at all hours in the evenings and weekends, and where employees feel, I have to be on my A game, I have to keep my job, I might not get that promotion if I don't reply to this email on a Sunday evening, that kind of thing. So I think a lot of it is very much about employer responsibility, but also how we manage our own health and well-being.
Yeah, I feel like you just dropped so much incredible knowledge. I think some of the stats you shared about unpaid leave is super important. I think what you said about people who are ill working from home takes me right back to your kind of batteries analogy, and it's probably doubly draining some of those batteries, and it's really going to probably take longer to get you back on your feet or back up to full capacity. And I think, to your point, Dr. Julian, that really ladders back into having an honest conversation with your manager, and not to just tie it all together and put it in a nice little package. But Marcus, to your point about being aware and having the mindfulness to actually like recognize where you are and how you're feeling and be able to communicate that up and out. So I guess these two topics, the right to unplug and kind of handling holiday hangovers, go really hand in hand, right? They're so interconnected. Dr. Julian, you were just talking about the right to unplug. Would love to know more from your perspective, like as a manager, and also, with a team, whatever that looks like. How do you either help your team manage the potential stress that comes with a holiday handover, or like even as an individual?
Yeah, I mean, simple things that we do right as a company is, well, I think there's operational things, and then there's sort of understanding the stress and burnout that we've been talking about as well. So, I mean, on an operational level, I think it's important to have an appropriate sort of handover policy, potentially even a pro forma, so that staff members know where and what has been done and who they're handing over from, and making sure that people are fully aware of what they're doing and what they need to do. Obviously, again, that comes down to sort of good communication. I think then holiday handovers, and we were talking about the fact that, you might have less staff on. Again, that's then around sort of not trying to not overpressure employees, and again, being aware of the signs of anyone that's could be struggling, and then acting early, making sure that that person's okay. I think, again, what we've been talking about is around that is understanding those signs and symptoms of burnout and the importance of well-being of those staff in mind. So, it's really important as an organization to have that awareness and then the solutions in place to deal with those problems. So I think having those policies in place is helpful, but that's why, having actual mental health support available for people that has to be done in a personalized way. And, there's no point in telling someone to go swimming when they can't swim. You have to have personalized tools for individuals. It has to be done sort of in that way. And then I think, well, the final thing for me, I mean, obviously there's loads, and Rebecca, you've mentioned loads as well, but, just making sure that you've got a fair time off policy, and again, be open and honest with everyone about that. Just making sure you're planning ahead, so that if there is someone that's crucial to the team, or let's say there's two key developers or whatever, then they both tried not to be off at the same time, which would then cause the whole business to collapse. So, you've got to try and plan ahead in those sort of situations as well.
Yeah, I think, it sounds like even at a managerial level, some of that awareness is really important. It's not just like an employee being aware of themselves, but you having that awareness of your organization and bandwidth and capacity. So Marcus, let's talk tools. Let's talk about how we actually create successful processes for holiday handover. And if you've seen anything, in your experience that can really set up an organization for success or an employee for success.
Thank you, John. And I'm going to reiterate one more time, what would be, again, as part of Find Your Flow proposition, like make sure you have the tools to work on your awareness, and also your team also does the same. Because at the end, when you're doing a handover process, it has to be simple, straightforward, and everyone has to be in the same page. We have something what we call like the 2-pager, because that's, very clear, down to the priorities. Everyone would read it, because who is going to read 30 pages of handover? Let's be honest, we are all human beings, that's, unless you work in the NASA, which is very specific, could be, but I think that most things comes down to simple things, make it simple, and try to be aware of the person that has to carry over the work that you are supposed to do, because you will go on holiday. So try to make it simple, easy to digest, communicate clearly, and simplify. Most of the things can be innovative. You can always simplify by bringing innovation, right? And the way to bring innovation is also being a highly aware person that understands the team, and try to make it simple. Again, 2-pager, high levels of awareness of yourself and your team, and support the team with the tools if they haven't yet developed, or they haven't yet had the opportunity, to develop high levels of awareness, because no one really teaches you that at school. No? So yeah, I think that would be like high levels of awareness and, simple 2-pager. Understand that the other person is a human being that needs to cover while you're away. So try to have that element of, empathy, and collaboration. So yeah, that's for me.
So I think we are going to head into some Q&A, and I actually have a kind of like a rapid fire question for you, if you will, just being conscious of time. So one of the topics that we hear a lot about is quiet quitting. And that's for those who might not be, I guess, indoctrinated or understand what quiet quitting is. It's pretty much employees who are putting like absolutely no more effort than is required into their job due to stress. So I guess for each of you, what is your like quick, off the hip response and thoughts on the trend of quiet quitting, and how it especially like in kind of its relevance or pertinence during summer? Let's change up the order. Do we want to start with Marcus first?
Thank you. I think that personal point of view, right, on quiet quitting. Quitting happens when you as an employee, from my point of view, feels that you're not being understood and you don't have the tools or the understanding on how to support yourself, right? You can easily get paid and while you don't do your job, because if you feel somehow, disappointed, because you don't have the support that you need, to be able to meet up the expectations, you end up, having a frustration, and then you feel like you will be better off somewhere else, which is never down to the place, it's all down to having the tools and support for you to be able to take the most out of yourself, right? But very rarely businesses understand this, right? Very rarely a business invests in the tools, given the support that people need to then be able to take the most out of themselves. And that's why we have invented, and we're on this mission with Find Your Flow. That's my view on quiet quitting. Yeah.
Okay. Next up, how about you, Dr. Julian?
Yeah, well, I think this comes down for me to purpose, motivation, and inspiration. So if someone is motivated and inspired, then they're going to work hard and they're going to enjoy what they're doing. If someone isn't, then they're going to do the minimum and not be happy. And as human beings, right, the thing that makes us happy is purpose. So again, if someone is very withdrawn and not enjoying what they're doing, the quiet quitting sort of mentality, I guess it's understanding why are they not happy? What's happening, and what are you doing as an organization to inspire, motivate, encourage people? So yeah, I think if you haven't got someone engaged in what you're trying to achieve and motivated by that, or feeling a sense of purpose, then I think you've got a problem. So yeah.
No, absolutely. And Rebecca, what about you?
Yeah, definitely exactly what's just been said. So obviously quiet quitting can be, as Dr. Julian said, lack of engagement, sense of purpose or recognition. And certainly in our experience, we work with startups, SMEs and charities and companies that generally really care about their staff and actually invest time and money into engagement surveys, which are all face-to-face rather than the online. And I think if you can get under the bonnet of how the people are feeling, it's really important to then actually build your HR strategies around the areas that you need to improve. So again, going back to this great survey that Employment Hero has done, it does show that over 75% of employees are more likely to be loyal to the company if the company is committed to them in terms of their well-being. And I think from this, almost like counter-challenging the quiet quitting, and perhaps even suggesting they're just doing their job. And is it perhaps they're not because they're not doing the overtime like we saw before, the 32 billion pounds worth of unpaid overtime. Are we asking too much? Do we actually feel that doing your job 37.5 hours a week, leaving on time, is that frowned on? You know, traditionally, it was, you know, my lifetime, you know, it was many hours over and above. But I think now there is that culture of I go in, fair days pay, fair days work, fair days pay. So I think the quiet quitting is an obvious result of companies not really understanding what motivates and engages their employees. And I think those companies that do that and spend the time and really understand what makes you tick, are you in the right job? Do you feel valued? What's your contribution towards our vision? How are you making a difference here? You know, how do your personal values kind of link with our own vision and values and what we invest in as well behind the scenes? I think wherever you've got really good sweet spots, but it only will ever become apparent through open conversations, but individual conversations. And I think probably just one final thing I'll say on this. So we have all great tools like engagement surveys, psychometrics, team psychometrics, you know, 360s, you name it, but not enough managers are actually having individual conversations with their employees and asking them, what do you value? How do I get the best out of you? What motivates you? And I think once you have that, that is all you need to actually start to build a really great experience where somebody really feels like they want to give back and contribute as a whole. And then you might get that extra shift or an extra half mile, who knows? But I think let's also focus on quality work being done in the hours that people can work, because actually that should be enough. You know, we shouldn't be asking much more from them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we have a few questions, and if folks are have questions, are welcome to drop them into the Q&A chat. So wanted to jump into one that was submitted, and I think Dr. Julian, this was maybe something based on something that you mentioned. The need to plan ahead for operational continuity. So example, if two people are key, they shouldn't be away at the same time. How do you manage this while also trying to be supportive to people taking time off when they need it, which is also part of that work-life balance equation?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. Like, well, let's say both of them have a wedding on the same day. Yeah. Then it's a case of planning ahead even further, isn't it? And saying, okay, well, if they both have to be off, what could I do as a business continuity to make sure that we can survive that time when they're both off? Because absolutely you should. I mean, I am a doctor, and as a junior doctor, I wasn't allowed time off to go to friends' weddings. That's just the culture, which is horrible, right? So you need to I think it's really important that you help people. But again, that just comes down to planning and understanding it and having a policy in place that everyone understands and knows, so that, you know, you can plan for those eventualities rather than a week before this happening, suddenly, you know, you're not aware that this is going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak even from like my experiences. It feels like oftentimes like having a plan and being able to work the plan then creates the visibility into that workload. So even just the process of being able to create a plan within your organ of your work then enables you to create a plan for time off and identify the times where like those you can have those gaps and manage workloads. So I think that's a really good point. And I think kind of bringing that human, like there's probably a trust equation in there somewhere between, you know, people communicating, you know, their need for time off and you being able to respond and acknowledge and create that trust by, you know, actually being able to deliver on that too. So one other question, so Rebecca, question for you. How can SMEs with limited resources support their employees' mental health and well-being, particularly those who might be signed off due to stress?
Okay, so I think from this point of view, John, I don't believe the size of any business kind of restricts from really being a great employer, you know, whether it's 2, 3, 4, 5 people or 100. I also don't believe you need a huge budget as well either to offer some really great benefits. So certainly when I started my business, working with many globals, starting with focusing on small business startups who have limited cash, it was about creating really fantastic health and well-being solutions for them to offer, which kind of mirrored what the global, you know, kind of cash-rich businesses have got. So these would be things such as employee assistance programs, 24-hour GPs, similar to what Dr. Julian mentioned earlier. Could be access to occupational health. It could be accessing healthcare cash benefits. And I know certainly from some of the suppliers we deal with, it's a very low cost. So for less than half a cup of coffee each month, you could provide your employees with EAPs, really good EAPs as well, and some really good opportunities to help them manage their health better. So I think a quick kind of few tips, there's always lots and lots more we want to kind of get into these conversations, but having empathic leaders and managers, obviously addressing kind of the workload in the first instance to make sure people aren't burning out, thinking about line managers, and we do a lot of training with line managers to upskill them, give them the confidence to have those conversations around effective one-to-ones, keeping those conversations on a regular basis. Return to work interviews are hugely important to try and unpick the reasons for the absence. So there may be perhaps, disguised under, cough, cold, flu type symptoms, but if that's reoccurring, then it could be more things there that need to be addressed, and perhaps occupational health could get involved. We spoke a little bit about presenteeism, flexible working as well, day one right now. So obviously, people should know about that they can request that. Financial well-being is a huge area, which obviously contributes towards stress as well. So bringing in perhaps pension advisors, people who can help look at, future planning strategies to help the employees. So if you've got financial packages with pension providers, if they're private pensions, then usually they'll do that free of charge. So give them a call, get them to come in and do a bit of a session with your staff about future pensions. So lots of different areas where on a small budget with limited resources, you can create some really fantastic strategies to kind of help across health and well-being, financial health and well-being, and really create a great structure for people, as long as that engagement's there as well, the one-to-ones and an open culture. So lots more to say on this, but I know we've run out of time, sadly.
No, I mean, I think that's really insightful, and I think the point that you made at the beginning is that, like, no business is really too small to prioritize this, because there's such an assortment of vendors now, who are able to help provide these and kind of cater to businesses of all sizes. So I think it's really about how do you surface that as if you're an employee or as a manager, how do you advocate for it on behalf of your employees if you are seeing some of these signs within the business as well. Actually, a couple of kind of like very insightful comments that I think kind of dovetail really nicely with this, that I'll kind of open it up to the whole panel to answer. But it actually it's kind of like internal. So Deborah actually said that quiet quitting is sometimes not just against an individual, like against the company as a whole. It can actually be, people on your team or a manager or a colleague that can contribute to the way that you're feeling about your work, or the reasons that you might, like the stress that might be causing your quiet quitting. I think what's interesting, and another question that got dropped in the chat was actually how do you approach people who you might see who are experiencing the symptoms of burnout, or who might seem overly stressed or persistently stressed, particularly if they're like either not somebody you're close with on your team, or if it's actually been somebody who's more senior. How do you manage that conversation up and communicate to them that you might like that it might be something that they need to look into?
I think for that,
sorry.
quite a few different strategies. So if there's an employee assistance program in place, it would be good to signpost to have that objective conversation. That also perhaps somebody trusted within the business to have a conversation, perhaps away from work with that person, perhaps over a coffee, or maybe a walk, or perhaps lunch or something like that. There's obviously trying to create that culture where people can reach out, because obviously, as we said, there may be a stigma to talking about burnout, because it may be that they feel they can't do their job, or kind of risking a promotion in the future, that kind of thing. So an EAP is a really great way. It's sometimes quite difficult to do it without an EAP, but if the person has been off sick, for example, if you are without EAPs or those kind of provisions, then perhaps a really good return to work conversation where you can start to structure questions and really kind of elicit and have, you know, gentle probing questions to try and find out the reason for the absence, and then from there tackle it. So again, there's a lot around that, but I'm more than happy to take that offline and speak to the person individually if they want some advice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. I just am conscious of time, so there is one last question about the 7 dimensions that you mentioned and the Employment Hero survey. So that survey will be really shortly, and we're happy to share that out. And can also Deborah point you in the direction of the 7 dimensions that Rebecca mentioned too. So with that,
I have
okay.
one more build to 1 second, you know, like based on what Rebecca, you know, built upon. Approaching someone senior in the business, I think that there's also some work and acknowledgement that regardless of the position of the person, no one is more or less than the other, and no one is, you know, better or less human. You know, we're all human beings, which means that regardless of your position, you know, you would be experiencing the same feelings probably that someone you like very junior in the team. So I think that that also helps to break down that barrier. It's like, oh, it's a very senior person. Yes, I know, but he, she, or they is a human being. Probably is going to experience anxiety, burnout, maybe depression. You know, there's no difference, you know, between that seniority. You know, it's just perception. You know, and I think that once we ingrain that in our brains, maybe the conversation might be less challenging. Put it that way. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that is an excellent build, and I think especially around this topic, it's important to approach this from like a human level first, right? Human to human. So with that, just thank you, Rebecca, Dr. Julian, Marcos, like extremely insightful. I absolutely learned some stuff, and have probably some tools and tips to apply to my own team, but also to my own life and how I prioritize the holiday and truly unplugging. Like to everyone who joined us, thank you very much for your time and making the time for this. Obviously, it's an extremely important topic. As you're closing out of the webinar and as this webinar is kind of ending, just a heads up that there will be a short survey that pops up. Please be honest. We are always looking for the feedback on how we can improve and how we can make these more valuable and useful to you when you're making the time for it. So please, I'm not worried about my ego being bruised. I'm more worried about this being a good experience for you. So please be really brutally honest in that feedback. Also, of course, we'll be sending out the recording and additional resources, and keep your eyes peeled for that survey that Rebecca mentioned a few times. Cheers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Have a lovely day, you all. Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.